Welcome to the live stream, ladies and gentlemen. We are the Indie Brothers, and we are diving into our game industry discussions today. I'm your host, Bumpy McSquigums. I am joined by Cupogoodness and a Tiny Disaster, and we're talking about launching a game with no marketing. Hello, folks. How are you today?
Hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going? Getting the Twitch stream up right now. There we are.
Oh, I should have asked you. Could you shift up slightly with your
Yeah.
camera?
Oh, I can see. I can see that my head is very halfway. A little more, maybe a little more. There we go.
Good enough. All right. So, been reading some stuff today. Cupogoodness found an article that has some interesting stats, reinforce some of the things that we know, has comparisons of a game released in 2018 versus 2021, and some insight, some numbers, a lot of numbers actually. And I don't know personally how valid, or not valid, I don't know what the word is. Like, they're all valid numbers. It's just I don't know how useful they are in context to fully explain it. Like, it's part of the puzzle, but I don't think it's the whole thing. So, any other thoughts on that before we dive in?
Yeah, I agree. This is not this is not the purest form of this experiment of we're going to release one game 5 years after another game. They're going to be completely different from different developers. That would give us kind of more pure data, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To actually say we can kind of take more of an apples to apples comparison. Even then, there are other variables at play. Obviously, even the time between 2018 and 2021, we have maybe two or even three different iterations
like 3
of
decades
Steam.
right there.
Right, because Steam has changed. Steam has so many changes over even a 12 to 24 month period of time that has to be kind of weighed in terms of how they, are exposing how they're allowing their customers, potential customers of your game to discover your game, etc. So, like, this is a not an unreliable narrator per se, but this is a sort of a not to be just taken as gospel type experiment. However, it exists, which is better than I think it not existing, because it gives us some information and some data that is true, kind of regardless of the situation. And then it also, as Bumpy points out, gives us some data when in comparisons, you have to kind of take some things into consideration when seeing that data and not just go, oh, well, it's kind of the way he maybe alludes to. And I think this is really a tough article for me because he does mention caveats on some places, but he doesn't necessarily mention them where he needs to, very specifically where he should.
I agree.
So that's an important aspect of this as well. This is not trying to disparage the individual. I think it's actually a really cool experiment. And I think he was probably just writing it right after the second release, and that's just kind of how he felt about it. That was his perspective, and that's totally cool and stuff like that. We're just taking a perspective like a little bit further out now, and getting to kind of see, maybe some things that he wasn't thinking about, or maybe he did have in consideration, but he just sort of didn't mention it too much, or the caveat wasn't exactly where it needed to be. So we'll go through that. Bumpy, has pointed out as we go into this, he's like, I'm not sure about the validity of this article fully and stuff. And again, he's not actually questioning the data or anything like that, but just how the person framed it. So we're not going to try to frame it in any particular way.
I do have one request for anyone who ever does article in the future. First off, I tried to whitewash myself here a little bit because it just blasted me. I was like a neon ghost for a minute. Please stop printing stuff with black writing on white background. It's so bad.
Oh yeah,
please.
And that's not even technically this person's fault. The Game Discovery newsletter.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't know why I don't know why Simon does that. Simon's a hip cat. He knows like what's cool and what's not cool and stuff like that. And like the white background is pretty tough to read. Especially I had to read this article like last night when my eyes were itchy.
Yep.
So I totally understand.
I was like, oh, this is and then I look on the camera. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm like see through at this point. Okay.
Yeah, it's really. I found a way in most of my browsers to be able to swap, the night mode on or whatever like that, but that article was not doing it for me. So, so anyway, there's a lot to pick at here. I don't know exactly where we want to start. TD, do you have something in mind that you feel like is the something that stood out, a takeaway that you thought, hey, this is something I'm thinking about? We don't need to go through the article, I think, in full, but rather just some of our takeaways from it. People can read the article when they want to, either now or
Could you
maybe they
post
did.
that in the chat?
I did it. I did it not in Restream though. I need to do that in Restream right now because sorry for Twitch double posting, but I did not get that to the YouTube before. Now we've got that on YouTube too. Yep. So TD, what do you think?
Overall,
Yeah.
it was like I didn't have any issues with the article. For me, it was more of an interesting jumping off point, just looking at kind of what Steam does if left to its own devices. And like, it's not like this guy made any big thesis or claims of like, oh, I learned this. It was just here's some data I picked up. And obviously, without knowing the games, and I was kind of digging around trying to find them, haven't had any luck yet. The quality of the game is going to make such a huge difference to the genre of the game, all of that. But I do still think it's interesting just to look at kind of what your base level is when you're just like throwing something up on Steam. And we'll talk a little bit about like this isn't his first game, and so maybe he has more of a following and all of that kind of thing.
Right.
But some like that's still relevant too, because we really don't think anyone should be just throwing up a game on Steam without any platform, anything. Like at the end of the day, not marketing your game is not what we are advocating for.
No. Rather that we're seeing one of the things that maybe I gleaned from this is that in 2018, times were maybe not tougher. 2021 obviously still is busy. I just think this current iteration of Steam is a little bit more refined that if you know how to play the game, so to speak, with Steam, you can benefit from that better, right? In 2018, it was kind of like a little more happenstance if you knew how to play the game, I think. Maybe you did know about the discovery queue. Maybe as a developer, you understood how to manipulate that properly, how to get onto the more like this on major Steam store game pages and stuff like that were similar to your own, that kind of thing. And then what was the other thing that was mentioned back then? The achievements. So like achievement hunting was much more of a discoverability thing back then, purely because not every game at that point, although every game at that point was getting to this point, had achievements. Now you can do achievements like literally for any game you want if you want to do that and stuff.
I
so
think
now
there was
Steam
one thing you missed in that. I was reading over your notes. He does say that you now have to hit a certain threshold before Steam will allow it to be publicly shown that there is achievements and trading cards.
Right, and that's kind of my point, is that since every game now has achievements, they're not giving that discoverability to every game with achievements now. They're only giving it to games that actually get somewhere in addition to having those things, right? So I definitely understood that point, was that like you don't just get to add achievements now and get a bit additional discoverability where you did in 2018. I'm a big blur. I'm trying to fix that. Anyway.
One of the other things, and this is me, I was trying to look up, I was hoping to get like immediate data on this, and I couldn't find it. Found some interesting articles that I'm going to look through. But I know whenever the Discovery Queue originally launched, which I don't know, maybe 2016, something like that. Maybe it was even longer back then.
Yeah, it was like 2015, 2016.
I went through a lot of that back in the day. But I can say, honestly, in the last 3 years, less than 100 games. Let's see. It should tell me somewhere how many. Oh, you know what? I think it tells you directly on the Discovery Queue. Hold on. Let me take a look at how many I've actually looked at. I might have to get to the end of it. Just skip through it real quick. Apologies. But I think I'm over like 2,000 or 3,000. Essentially, it's just not something I use very often anymore. It was the new fun thing at the time. And it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then now I just feel like it's a massive fall off in general people using it. I wanted to try to get data to confirm that, not just it's me doing that. But I couldn't find anything that said there was this much back then versus now. I viewed 2,428 in the last 3 years, less than 100. So
it's not just anecdotal. There's some evidence there, right there. That's data driven. And the Discovery Queue, I totally agree with this point, and I think it's one of the important points that I gleaned from this article is the Discovery Queue has basically imploded from the weight of so many releases, and or they no longer factor in upcoming releases, which is something that he mentioned could be a thing. I don't know if that part's true or not. I haven't had a chance to check that out. But I do believe the first part is probably the case, is that the Discovery Queue is now too bloated. to take advantage of. I think that's what you were getting at, Bumpy, and maybe that's not
No,
exactly your
no.
point. Okay.
My point is people just aren't using it as much, so it's not driving as much traffic.
So that's all. One thing that could happen there, that whether we know it or not, is that Valve could backseat it in a direct or indirect way, right? Like some of these features that they release that they do. Steam Curators, for instance, is a great example of a feature that they have sort of prioritized and then deprioritized and then sort of reprioritized throughout like a period of a decade or maybe a little less than that. Like how that matters to your discoverability and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the discovery queue was something that was, like you're pointing out, Bumpy, was more of a hotter thing 5 years ago, and it's just not anymore. So that people have moved on, and I think it might be because there's too many games now. But I don't know.
I'm curious for you guys, if you jump into your discovery queue, how accurate is the like recommendations? Are you immediately seeing things? Because I'm finding I haven't been on it in a while, but like all of the games that are getting recommended to me are like Elden Ring and Warhammer 3, games I'm not going to play. So it almost feels of like, oh, has someone just paid money to put this very expensive games?
This is what I just found in this other article right before we started, and it kind of speaks to what you're talking about right now. I posted it there in the Restream thing, but basically they did a thing looking through. They kind of did a breakdown, a little bit more of a deep dive in the discovery queue, and I want to go through this more at some point to get more information. But basically, they did a count of like 500 and I don't remember how many games, 570-ish games, and then here's the reasons why they were shown in the discovery queue, and this is exactly what you're talking about, a tiny disaster. The number one reason is because it's popular. Number two reason, because it has positive user reviews. And everything else from there is like less than 10%.
So the first two things don't connect at all. Like as far as like, what would be, this is actually something that the individual customer, it's tailored for them. The first two items, which take up, like you said, 90% of the influence.
Well, it's like 80%, but like the third one, which would be just to see if you'd be interested in it, that's 6.8%, and then because it's new on Steam, it's 5.4%, and then Metacritic score and lower and lower. And so I found that very interesting. And then what was the other one I saw down here? Oh, you were wondering about the pre-release and all that. There's another one here. It was like 600 and I don't know, like 70 games or something like that. Fully launched 553, 80% of them. Early access 109. Pre-purchase 18, and coming soon 2.
There you go. So it's not like you're excluded, but you have to be one heck of a big release to even get into that pool, so to speak, of getting that discoverability ahead of time.
It's so weird to me. It's the games that do not need help being discovered.
Yeah, I know.
Like Hitman 3 was recommended to me. I was never going to play that game, but it did not need my assistance.
The thing is that Steam has other mechanisms now that do a better job than the discovery queue, getting you the games that you would want to play. So I think that the discovery queue was originally that was the intention, and I think that was actually working for a time, but it's not working anymore. It's gotten to the point where they're it's
kind of
hedging
their bets, right? They're like, hey, it's kind of like that thing where people are like, hey, I'm going to send out keys to people who have this many views on average. It's that, well, I know I'll at least hit this number because that's their average thing. Here, this is a popular game. If I recommended it to you, maybe you didn't know it. And they're like, oh, it's popular? Oh, cool. Or I've heard of that. It's one of those.
Valve can't lose, despite tiny disasters like adversity to these games. By putting them up, they're going to win more than they lose, basically. Like in general, in terms of the numbers of people they're going to introduce and will get to wishlist and possibly buy the game. So they don't. That is one of the biggest struggles with developers, is to get Valve to kind of play our side, even though they don't necessarily have to. Indie developers in particular. They don't have to play our side for them to be successful. They just don't have to care, and that's a big worry. Obviously, it's like, oh crap, they don't have as much skin in the game to support indies as indies, of course, themselves have their own skin in it. Which means if they don't have a stake in us because the money doesn't matter to them, then it really does. We do become sort of a thing that can be messed around with, possibly even thrown away entirely, which I don't think that they would ever do. but it stands to reason that it's just possible, and that's just a scary kind of thing. So some of these steps that they've taken over the last couple of years are done sort of in spite of that notion that Valve doesn't have to care about us and stuff like that. It's that they're going, yeah, but we'll throw you a bone, and they do. There's certain things now that they allow us to do. This is not me reprimanding or talking bad about Valve or Steam. Again, from a business perspective, that's just the truth of it. They get most of their money right now from a game called Elden Ring. Steam Deck is out right now. Those are the things that are tops and the games that are at the top, and usually the top 10, are outpacing the rest of the games in the ecosystem by a great amount, or at least in, kind of going in a way where you're going, oh my gosh, these top games are making so much money. So
I want to shout out an indie game that is in the top 4 amongst the giants right now, Heroes Hour. It's a Heroes of Might and Magic-esque game, and it's killing it, and good job to them. It's great to see. I love it. It's a great game, too.
That was really, I saw that on Twitter. That was pretty cool. I was like, man, I wonder if they have an Elden Ring tie-in. I mean, just joking, but like, it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I know. So the takeaways that I wanted to, or the things I wanted to go through just real quick, and then we can get to your notes. So the differences, 2018 to 2021, obviously there's a pandemic. The whole landscape of gaming has changed in some capacity versus others. It's not his first game at this point, so he has some back. This is all stuff that you mentioned, just reiterating. So he's got some, back fans from his previous releases. Additionally, he had it on Steam for a much longer time on the store page before it was released. So he garnered 6 times as many wish lists before launch because it was on there for much longer. So these are all things that change stuff a little bit, but
yeah, it shows up in launch day specifically. I think really like that wish list difference.
I think those are the big things that I just wanted to make sure that was out there so you guys know. And he points it out throughout some of these things, right? So just knowing that going forward is all. And the discovery queue that we talked about, that was one of my big points. I'm like, I just don't know that many people use it anymore. And as Tiny Disaster pointed out, it's not even that useful really, because it doesn't like, hey, you like these things? We recommend this. It's, hey, here's all of our popular games, and oh, you might like this because you played that. Like 1 out of every 30 or something. So
yeah, and so the 2021, the new game versus the old game, clearly, like we saw, like he emphasized the importance of proper tagging because he was getting a lot of his impressions from discovery via relevant tag browsing. Yeah. So like, and that is to say, like when you're, and you two know this, but just as a reiteration for our audience, when you start a Steam store page, you have the option, and I think maybe it's mandatory to add like 3 to 5 or more tags to your store page that describe your game within genre or some of the aspects of your game, mechanical stuff, some of the maybe even vibes, are like some tags could be described as vibes.
Like so there's delicious typing, management, casual, difficult, arcade.
Comfy would be a vibe I think that you'd see in a tag now, like in certain situations.
Lakes, for instance. See what they've got. Adventure, indie, choices matter, open world. I would expect
choices matter.
Would have been
choices matter is definitely a lot of you see a lot of times, and choices matter to me is one of the ones that like it seems like it's a hot tag right now, whereas like indie means not a whole lot. Like indie is a very generic tag where it's going to be hard for
so many thousands,
so many things, right? And a lot of times basically like it's not just the breadth but the depth but the breadth, that you can have really big games too in the indie category, right? And really small games. And so ultimately it's fine to have the indie tag, but not to maybe have that as one of your top 5 priorities. Try to find ways to describe your game as best you can with those tags and be truthful with them. You know what I mean? Like make sure that they're not misleading in any way, because that will backfire on you if they are. However, if they are relevant, then we see that in this situation, this was the most kind of encouraging thing for me in 2021. Now I understand this is a second game, and there are elements to that at play here.
I wanted to ask your opinion on it. Do you feel that maybe he messed up back in 2018, just didn't do as good of a job, he did better, or do you think the landscape has shifted and it's now more important, and they just do a better job. Because I know the search is like the whole search mechanic in
Right.
Steam, it has improved a lot, and you can search much more specifically based on
Yeah.
tags and all of that. So, what do
Yeah,
you
I
think
think
it
our
was?
understanding. Yeah, well, I think our understanding of tags was just kind of getting there in 2018, but wasn't where it's at, like now specifically, or anywhere in the last couple of years, where we understood where Indie Brothers really made a dynamic shift from a lot of like outside efforts in marketing to no, let's go all in and focus much more on the Steam store page, and we'll add all those other marketing elements around it as well. But we need to get this stuff right first. This is a priority.
And
That kind of
the
happened.
tag optimization is one of the big things that we do. That's like one of our
Yeah.
forward-facing offers. I don't know what's the right word. Things that we do.
Yeah,
Whatever.
services. Yeah,
Services.
sorry,
Yeah.
one of our services. Yeah, and in 2019, that's where we really started to dig into that stuff. And one of our main guys, y'all know him, with and on the Slack, he spends a lot of time, really devoted to kind of working with Steam, seeing how it changes, seeing what's working, and he's doing a lot of these little experiments. Not quite releasing, obviously games or anything like that, like this person has, but doing a lot of stuff with developers we work for on the back end to sort of glean what's working and what's not. And so he guys like Steam has released like their own like automated tag optimizer and stuff, and that does work to some degree. But we do see some even better results when you do it manually through our process and such. So that's to basically say though, I feel like he probably tagged. I don't know. I think tags mean more. Yes, and so specifically, I think that relevant tag browsing is what Discovery Queue was back then, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like they've switched places. So now the relevant
versus
tag
the
browsing
automated Discovery Queue. Now you're specifically searching yourself,
and people are finding you better.
Yeah.
Like potential customers that want to find your games are finding them better in 2021 than they are in 2018. This is the hopeful part of the conversation that I wanted to have today, is that I feel like in 2018, it was harder to just release a game as a hobbyist and have anybody see it. Now in 2021, if you play the game right, as in like you're setting up your store page properly, you might not necessarily need all that additional marketing that like you hear about, but you can't afford, so to speak. If you are a hobbyist developer that's trying to sort of build up game by game, there may be a path for you to do that through basically your understanding of how to make a really good Steam store page. And then of course, like Steam store streaming, you being able to just reach out to some streamers and like other marketing that maybe you can do on your own that a lot of indie developers can do without, having to pay out for a marketing company. Not if you got the budget, go for it, hire us, you know what I mean? But like, if you don't, there's kind of some hope here that if you set this up right, that you can get yourself in a position to at least make some money. Not like maybe not, if you are a notable indie developer that's looking to make, $150,000 on this release in the first 6 months. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. But if you're like a developer that's just trying to get your, dip your toe into the water and see, what could happen and get some data, and you're, maybe you're a hobbyist, you're part-time, etc. There's something that you can do here that says to me that Steam, even though the article points out, you're not going to get a ton of traffic just by plopping it down.
Yeah.
Like, you need to do the things like on Steam that is basically marketing on Steam, right? Like it's almost like, you're doing your marketing, but it's within the Steam store ecosystem itself. So it's a little bit not exactly like, the traditional marketing we know as, but it's really important, obviously, because taking in those first, the proper tagging and the relevant tag browsing, that seems to be kind of the new way a lot of people find. Because that's the thing, is that I think a lot of his wishlist, Bumpy, came from these relevant tag browsing folks, and maybe some of them maybe the Venn diagram of people that bought the game, the first game, and relevant tag browsed aren't, they're not two separate circles. Maybe there was like some crossover there. But it seems like when he said like 50 to 60% of his direct traffic was from this tag browsing. So it's like, whoa, this is really, really important now. Because unlike the Discovery Queue, tag browsing actually gets prospective customers to your page better than them having to go, well, it's Elden Ring, well, it's Rust, well, it's all these games that have just performed so well for so long on Steam, or just are blowing up right now. And you're just not they're not gonna wade through those top releases to get to yours now on the discovery queue. It's just not gonna happen and stuff. So taking those first 2 points together, I'll wrap up here, guys. I know I'm running. It
Also just wanted, you said
okay.
about 50% or so for tag searching now. Whereas previously it was 68%, I think was the number of his traffic coming in was from the discovery queue in 2018.
Right. So it basically flipped, and it was 8% or something in 2021 for the discovery queue. So it basically vanished. Like not much coming from there. Not that it's gone, but 8% is obviously a lot less than what was it, 68%, whatever you said. So taking in those first 2 points together, and he does point this out, it also seems like, and we kind of alluded to this already, it also seems like Steam is doing a better job optimizing how they direct traffic to your store page. So this is similar to like low value wish lists versus high value wish lists. Very interestingly, the first like Steam Next Fest stuff, I don't even know what it was called back then, but when they were first doing those Steam festivals, like the Steam Summer Festival or Autumn Festival, whatever they were called.
The Autumn Festival or Summer.
Right.
First, yeah.
Those dudes that were releasing those games, those people that were releasing those games or that were involved in those festivals with their games, just got huge amounts of wish lists, like a ton. The problem was they didn't hold up in terms of being high value. A lot of them turned out to be low value because people were just sort of swept up in the sort of novelty of the Next Fest. People were downloading demos like crazy. Everybody was like, call to action, get the wish list. And then it was time to actually buy the game. A lot of people were like, actually, nah. And it turned out that they weren't actually that interested in the game itself. Now fast forward to the last couple of Steam Next Fests, we've seen that the dynamic has changed dramatically because people are used to these things now. So now the people who are very similar to how there's so many games out all the time, and now people are much more discerning in what they purchase. People are much more discerning in what they now wish list and demo.
Yep.
So they're not just going to just grab every single demo they see because this is a new novelty. It's not anymore. It's something where now when you get a wish list, it's actually higher value, even if you're getting less total. If you say you got 5,000 versus 15,000 or 20,000, like a couple of years ago, that still could be higher value total, those 5,000 wish lists, than the 20,000 that were, acquired in a way that just doesn't have as many people like on that list total that are into the games, so to speak. Going
back to the original Steam Next Fest, to give you a break here for a second. The first, or whatever it was, like the summer and the autumn, there was a lot less people participating in the first, say, 2 or 3, but then everybody saw how like important and massive that was, and then it became incredibly bloated now. But that now means people are like, okay, this is a thing that's going to keep happening. We're going to get a chance for demos. I like these type of games. I'm seeking those out specifically, which speaks to exactly what you just said. And they only download the ones that they want versus going, oh, there's like 20 games. I could check out all these games. This is great. Now there's like 2,000 games. You're like, I'll do these 10. You're not going to go and download 2,000 demos at this point. So
it's really crazy how it works. It's crazy how that works because it's like you think when it keeps getting bloated that it's not. It's the system will break down, but somehow it actually refined itself naturally.
Well, they have search parameters inside the Next Fest main page now too, where you can search for action games or whatever you're looking for.
So credit to Valve, they're really doing some efforts to try to get they're really making some efforts to try to get
people to the
their customers correct, which is really, I think, makes sense for all three parties in this component of customers, platform, and developers, right? I think it makes sense for everybody involved there. The problem is that the person who's the platform that's in the main control can still make money with or without that process going on. So it takes them to have to care, and it seems like they're caring to some extent. So that's good. Just to wrap up my last point, whether it's wish lists or sales or whatever, the traffic that hits your page now, if the tags are accurately, put into place, does seem like it's better per impression than it used to be. And I feel fairly comfortable stating that because I think people gravitate towards things that work for them. As Tiny Disaster pointed out, we're not going to gravitate towards the discovery queue anymore because that's not working for us anymore. So we're going to gravitate towards the areas of Steam that are giving us the best opportunity to find the games that work. Not everybody, But enough because he also pointed out that a lot of this comes from the fact that Steam has just a lot more traffic now. Every year it has more traffic than it did the year before. That can't be understated, right? They keep adding more and more, and Elden Ring is going to bring in more and more. Because Elden Ring is a franchise that actually originated on the PlayStation side of things. Well, I mean, if you go with the whole Souls games and stuff. So
the only sad part about all that is the PC version apparently is the worst version of the game right now.
Yeah, they're gonna. I'm sure it'll get fixed, but it is kind of suffering right now. Despite it being the worst version, it's still at the very top of global sellers, ahead of like Steam's hardware, which is selling really well right now. Both the Steam Deck, which we should talk about at some point down the line, maybe, and as well as their VR is selling really highly as well. So it's really interesting to see. It's actually that game that Bumpy mentioned that's up so high is only behind like those 3 products. It's like they are actually the second top. They're like the second top game. If Elden Ring didn't exist, they'd be in first right now probably. So that's just
considering what the game looks like and how it plays. It's great. Don't get me wrong, but you have Elden Ring. It's shiny. It's beautiful. These giant open worlds. From a developer that's been around for decades and it's just been incredible games. And then it's this little indie game that had a love and a passion for HOM 3 that's just making noise, and it's very encouraging.
Well, I mean, this is life changing for them most likely. When you get to those heights, when the only thing you can't crack is Elden Ring, you know what I mean? Like that is a crazy.
I think it was 6 to 8 months ago they picked up Goblin's publisher, Goblin Studio as a publisher, so that was a big deal too.
It seems like that worked out very well for them.
And see, I'm not being bitter about the dropped sponsorship thing, but just saying, I'm glad that they're just doing well. The developer, worked hard at the game, so I'm happy to see it's being successful.
Yeah. So, TD, I've been rolling. Did you want to make any comments or anything while I'm taking a deep breath?
So when you first mentioned this article, I'm most interested to see, and there's only so much we can tell, especially without seeing the games. It's just like what this tells us about Steam's tools for discoverability, and looking through the Discover queue and how like not personalized it is, and coming from TikTok blowing up because their algorithm got so spot on for so many people, just giving you things you didn't even know you wanted. I really want to see more of that on the game front of like I shouldn't have to look for the weird quirky games that I would buy just on the name. Steam has a lot of information to tell me that this is a game I would be interested in, so I really hope they build that more so I don't have to go looking for it. It's just, here's a Discover queue that's actually for you.
Yeah. I would wager that even Bumpy has games that he should have on his radar, but there's just too many of them and they get missed. And he's someone who does not take kindly to missing games that should be on his radar. So you know what I mean? Like there's just so many out there that it is amazing sometimes because you'll just get something to pop up. Oh my God, this looks like right up my alley. Yeah. Oh my God, it was released like 4 years ago. Yep. You know what I mean? So it's that happens all the time, and it's usually a good thing. And I want that to continue to happen. You know what I mean? Like I want that to happen more often if possible, and maybe not 4 years after the game comes out, maybe closer to when it's releasing.
There's a side-scrolling tactics game that I just finished streaming a month or two ago, and I'm like, what? How does that even work?
Where have you been all my life?
Yeah, I'm like, how does that even work? So I was very intrigued, and I'm like, I'll pick it up, and I played it. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. So yeah, that was just a random one that I don't even know how I found it. It might have been Discovery Queue or something else entirely. I think I might have been digging through the Switch actually, and it was like something else I was doing. So. Oh, that's a nightmare to do too. Oh, it's not talking about Switch.
So Steam's no problems. So Steam's made strides to provide a wider variety of traffic sources now than they have like 3-4 years ago, and it seems like the relevant tag browsing particularly is like really sharp, and that's something that you should be emphasizing if as a developer is making sure that you have those tags really nailed. Along with every other store page optimization we've talked about in the past, that matters to the initial impressions. But remember that the cardinal rules of what have you done for me lately and show us momentum on your own is still something that Valve is looking at all the time. Like if you're able to drive your own momentum and engage in sort of Steam's kind of systems and algorithms and engage those through your own efforts and through your own community's efforts, then you will get more discoverability and more, higher discoverability, I should say, through Steam just by that alone. That alone, like it's easy. But I mean, it is true though. Like it's something that you go, okay, how can I make an impact on this? Where Steam basically says, well, they did this, we kind of have to. Not even manually, right? It's an algorithmic thing, so it's just an automatic thing that clicks in if you reach certain thresholds. So like one of the things that he went into a little bit is the reminder to get to 10 user reviews as quickly as possible. We've talked about this before, the idea of needing to get to a certain threshold of user reviews, because that opens you up to so many more people to see your game, and more people to potentially click through to your game than you would otherwise. While you can't be pushy about this, you can't put pressure on your customers or your community. You should have call to actions for those who have been maybe part of your pre-release community, beta testers, people who have been along for the ride and are like, I'm going to buy your game day one, or I've already pre-purchased, etc. You shouldn't have individual conversations, but just like general reminders. Hey, Steam user reviews mean a lot to us getting started. You're basically priming them. You don't want to tell them this is what you have to do, but rather like it's so much. It's and that's the other thing. Valve itself says you cannot ask for positive reviews, but you can ask for. You can emphasize that you'd like to get a review, right? So,
review, right? Just ask for the honest review.
The honest review, of course. Now, this also points to but you have to, while you're going for those reviews, you have to make sure that when you release your game, you're in a spot where you're going to be staying above water, so to speak, in terms of your percentage. Because this game dipped into the mixed section, which just means you go below 70%, I believe, and just like 69%, I believe, is when you hit mixed status, and their sales dropped to 80% from where they were at the time that they went from mostly positive, I think is what 70% is, or 71% is, to mixed. So Valve says that they don't turn off your discoverability when you go from mostly positive to mixed, just if you go from mixed to mostly negative. So the emphasis here is that if you have a mix,
in it, probably
it's a pox. A mixed is a pox upon your house. Like, you need to not have mixed going up, because people themselves see that and go, nope, I am not committing to this. There are exceptions to this rule. Torchlight 3, there are other games out there that started out just really terrible with reviews, but because of their notoriety and popularity, they get by. Indies, not so much, right? We see that this nondescript indie took an 80% sales dip when they went into mixed. And they said they worked on another game that sort of backed that up, because both games they went down and then came back up, and the sales basically responded to those dips and response and climbs back up. And so the emphasis, not only to get a lot of user reviews early, but also to understand that you have them, that there's no hidden things here that are going to come up where the players go, what? Ugh. And suddenly have that, kind of, they're turned off and they're going to go to the negative review side of things. You obviously, negative reviews happen. But to me, if you know what your players are looking for and you haven't deceived them too much, it's not hard to get above at least 80%. And it's really not too hard if you know what you're doing in terms of your gameplay mechanics to get 90% or higher, I think. It's really about setting expectations, right? Yeah. Like, if you set expectations properly, then the customer knows what they're getting. And if you set expectations in a way that you sort of deliver on them or blow them out of the water, you're going to get more positive reviews, and you're going to get those kind of coming in. So obviously, while you're pushing for reviews, make sure that your game is in a place where you feel like it's going to get that positive review score total, which
get reviews from someone before you're seeing feedback on Steam the first time.
Yeah, if you don't have a feel for that, then you need to go get a feel for that, right? And that's exactly right. Yeah, because it's something that I feel like a lot of people would have a feel for, but some people might not.
Yeah, and so Indie Brothers even offer mock reviews too. That's one of the things that we offer. So we have somebody who plays through the game, and they'll go through and they'll write up a review, so you at least have someone else's opinion who put out an actual coherent, good review, right? Not good, right, and this is a great game, but honest and critical.
Right, and it's not just the full reviews we can do. We'll also give you like maybe 6, 7 people with like individual feedback that would give you the same impression of, oh, this might not get positive reviews 9 out of 10, which is kind of what you're going for, right?
Yeah.
8 or 9 out of 10 you want to have coming in with a positive review. You're going to be in great shape there, especially if you get to that 10, 25, 50, 100 threshold in kind of the time that needs to be done. You don't want to get to the 10 threshold at like a week. You'd like to get that within the first 48 hours, maybe.
Oh, there was one small thing that he pointed out in the article, and it's something that we talked about, and I think we missed saying it. Back with the tags and doing all the stuff, and that goes back to the whole searching through the tags. And say you searched for a specific genre, like maybe strategy RPG, for instance. He says that you'll be there amongst a bunch of others, and one of the things that I think he said it either works for him or it's just very important to do, and we've said this 1,000 times, eye-catching, grabbing capsule art.
Yeah.
Because that is going to make you stand out amongst, the sea of everybody else that's there. So that's just something that he mentioned, and I figured we should reiterate that because that's one of our big
Totally
points.
great point. Getting into the pool is one thing. Getting recognized in that pool is a different thing as well. So you need to have an emphasis on how do you stand out amongst the pool, amongst the crowd, so to speak, that you get into. It's nice to get into the door and get on a list, right? But now you need to like stand out from the people that you're competing with, those people that are among you, so to speak. Yep. So it's kind of sucky point that he points out. Not that it's sucky for him to point this out, but it's just kind of a sucky point. The Steam reviews sticking for refunders. This hurts developers. I feel like this works against the developers lightly without abuse, and of course with abuse could cause major headaches, possibly even a nightmare scenario for developers. So I imagine if it was abused, it could be pointed out to Valve, and hopefully things could get patched up. But it is sort of so. The rule now is if a Steam review gets posted and then someone subsequently refunds after they post that Steam review, the Steam review user review still remains up. It will say that it was refunded, but that doesn't really matter that much.
I've seen people who literally purchase the game to play it for a little bit and then do a review, and then like they say that they do this, and I'm like, that's terrible. What do you mean?
Right. Positive or negative, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's just a terrible
like way to do things. But like I see both sides of the I don't know, of the argument for this one, because say I purchased the game, I hated it. It wasn't at all what was promised. I thought it was just terrible, and I didn't like it. I'd want to convey that to someone, and even if I refunded the game, I think that's a valid point. But like you said, there's definitely a lot of room for abuse, and that person's never going to get a chance to, they patched the game, they fixed these problems that I had, a little bit of discourse back and forth with the developer, and like, I didn't know this was a setting or something I had to change, or the developer's like, I didn't know you had that problem, here, we did a fix for it,
And just humanly and imperfectly, like, I feel like you can stick me with a negative review or you can stick me with a refund, but don't stick me with both, man. Like, don't stick me with both. Like, that hurts. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, if you want a negative review, then stick by your purchase and so be it and stuff like that. Yeah. Otherwise, like, you didn't like the game, refunded. You still make a valid point that, like, you would, as a content creator or a maven or as, like, a disseminator of relevant information in this department, it kind of feels like I would want to disseminate that information. Do you know what I mean? Like, one way or the other and stuff like that. I would maybe be like, maybe do it on your channel and not on my Steam page.
I feel like those should still exist on the page, but like if you get the product for free, we don't technically count toward whatever we're supposed to dispose
so we pull it from the percentage, right? So if it's a free or if it's a refund review, if a free copy review or a refund copy review, it would be nice if both of those didn't count towards the percentage. As it is right now, only one of them, the free reviews, don't count towards the percentage, but the refunds ones still do. So that's another point of just like, try to avoid having any reason for reasonable people to do this, and you should be fine.
Yeah. All right, let's see. So we talked about dipping into the mixed sections, bad Steam reviews, and then the 2021 game generated more revenue than 2018 in its first 6 weeks, 2 times the same.
And so we have caveats to this, and we talked about them. And it's just me trying to reemphasize the point that I think today it's easier to get your game discovered that can lead to actual wish lists and conversions into sales than it was in 2018.
Yeah.
I think what I mean by that is that it's not that Valve didn't have mechanisms for that to happen, but that it's easier for us as the developer and the developers and the developer support teams and such to kind of control that now, like to actually have agency over it and to make decisions that are going to make potentially huge impact on how we do inside of Steam, how we do it within the Steam, traffic ecosystem, so to speak, which is like so important right nowadays.
Yeah, using the discovery queue versus the tag searching, which is kind of the big comparison that we've been doing. Again, discovery queue back then it was a bit more personalized and sent to usually to stuff that might interest you based on other things you played, so on and so forth. That's changed. Now you're manually going, I like this type of game. Let me find it. So while before you might have still been exposed to the game, a lot of other people were that might not have really wanted that game. Whereas now people are actively seeking out this type of game. So like you said, the impressions that come through are going to stick more than they did in the past.
We're not at a point where like the algorithm is going to work for us passively, right?
Yeah.
It's not just going to be able to put it in front of us like we kind of want it to. I think it eventually may get there if they keep working and refining, right? Because if we keep giving them input from us as individual customers, you imagine that over time they could be like, we could get this better. You playing a very small indie strategy RPG doesn't mean we're just going to throw every Square Enix title and that's it at you, kind of thing. So even though that's like, within maybe the larger ballpark, you're like, let's get into the sections, let's get into the seats right next to each other, kind of thing, so to speak. So, this is again, I thought that this again was an imperfect article, but it let us discuss a lot of the Steam mechanisms and systems that we are always sort of skirting around or talking about. Some things I think we've reiterated. I think we'll always have these kind of talks where there's going to be reiteration on the platforms that we talk about. Like we talk about Steam all the time, so that does happen. But it does give us some things to sort of say, okay, that cements, maybe not cements, but it reinforces a little bit some of the thoughts that we had. Some things are like brand new, like I didn't have any idea with that. So it was nice to get that kind of information from them. But I feel like ultimately they got more sales at their launch day because of the wish list for sure. Yeah. Then afterwards, the 2018 and 2021 like traffic kind of equals out. So it's just kind of like, to me, play the game in the right way, and you can see some really good results. If your game, as Titus Asher pointed out, if you have a game that is worthy of garnering results in the first place, like if it's just trash or whatever, like you're not going to get anywhere with that. Like, I'm not trying to call anybody's efforts trash, but just, you have to understand that there's a certain, audience for your game, and that you have reached a certain quality threshold in at least in the areas that matter the most to PC gamers. That is definitely like, I think, a bare minimum thing before you could just say, oh, I got to hit my Steam tags right, and I got to hit, my store page and capsule art right, and things are just going to go swimmingly for me.
But I think one thing that could be a takeaway from this, and there's, again, no way to know for sure with this particular developer or the games, but a possible learning moment is this individual who put out these games works in marketing. This is a few years down the road of more experience of, like, even though we're saying no marketing, we know now how you build your Steam page is part of your marketing.
That's true.
Yep.
He's better at it now. So we don't know, like, his capsule art, his copy, just which screenshots he was using. That could all have improved.
Absolutely.
Outside of how Steam changed. That, like, and odds are the game is a little better because this was down the line not his first game. I don't know if the first one was, but that kind of thing, that matters. So
yeah, it does. It's really it's to the point of what you're saying and what Bumpy's been pointing out. It gets to where I have to just say I'm willing to bet that the importance of proper tagging is above, sort of prioritized above some of those other variables in play here that encourages me to think that 2021, whether it was a random release or it was a building off of release, was going to see a better situation than the 2018 release. That there's no way to know for sure. I'm just sort of saying that I would bet on it. You know what I mean? Like, I would bet my money on the fact that I think it's easier now to do this with how we talk about how you need to get your store page up, pre-release, wish list, etc. It's still daunting, but seemingly, if you understand how the things work, how the mechanisms work, and you know what to do, and we're willing to put in the effort, that seems like it's a better place than it was in 2018, which is encouraging.
All right, one final thing that he mentioned, and then we're gonna have Cup hopefully regale us with some Chef Squad stuff here. But one final thing you mentioned, it's something that we've talked about and something we always push for as well, is doing everything you can pre-release to get on the new and popular, is it popular and upcoming? That's it, popular and upcoming section on Steam, because that's where you get a giant visibility leap versus just being a new release amongst everything else. Like a big pile of like every game releasing. You're actually in a featured section at that point.
Right, and that's like a momentum thing. Like you're not just going to get on there most of the time, like
You have to do
unless
stuff
you're
to get there. Yeah.
right, and over a period of time, right, over like months of time and build up, and then hopefully as you get closer to the release date, you've sort of built up enough wish lists. And what have you done for me lately? You have a good daily wish list kind of flow still coming in, even at baseline, so to speak. So baseline meaning you're not doing a Steam Next Fest or anything like that at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just what's sort of has settled in after you've made some big pops, made those Steam Next Fest, made those announcements, beta tests, et cetera. Where do you kind of fall into? And if it's high enough, that will also help you with the addition of you have the lump sum of wish lists that matter to them. 6,000 to 10,000 area is kind of a rough start, good start kind of like area, but there's no exact number with it for sure, and it depends on the competition a lot of times, right? It's like a moving goalpost, so to speak.
So I know we did
because
Oh, sorry. I know we did
No,
a
you're
deeper
fine.
dive into Chef Squad. So, from the no marketing standpoint, is there anything you can add just from your personal experience with Chef Squad? Because you guys really just, I know it's definitely not apples to apples. It's like apples to Volkswagens, but it's there's
one
still
point
some comparisons
Yeah, well, the one difference for us is that we didn't have any pre-release build
at
up,
all. Yeah,
and so
released and announced same day.
And so we saw like the absolute negatives of that. Like we saw that Steam does not appreciate that versus like you doing the build up and so to speak and stuff.
Store page, everything was same day, right? Store page and release. Yeah.
We were ready for that. It's not like we were like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this, but rather it's kind of it's sort of confirming what you thought, which is like, hey, you just can't do the whole splat release and expect that to go well. Like can it happen? Can it be pulled off? Yeah, I'm sure it can.
Probably.
But it's got to be right time, right place, right game, right developer, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like other platform holders involved. Like if a bunch of people like were all in on like say Steam and Nintendo, all these platform holders were like, yeah, we'll back you on this, and that's different, right? You're gonna get like a lot of that big pop. That may be worth the trade and stuff, but that's not what was happening here. So we kind of knew getting into it. Yeah.
You also did a little bit of post-launch or at-launch marketing too with What If Julia, was that right? And
What If Julia was
streamers.
What If Julia was the sort of the face of the game, so to speak. And then we had her as like the tutorial person, and then we had her do like a long stream for her channel. Like So Cook Serve Delicious and Vertigo, we like to double benefit because we will often voice actors and streamers are crossover a lot, right? So we often will find voice actors that have a streaming audience, and that benefits us obviously twofold because we have someone who can do the job pretty well and also has an audience to then expose our game to, talk about what they're doing with the game, etc. And we're not like you have to do that, but it's kind of a natural thing if they want to.
Yeah. So they're part of something. They're like, hey, look what I got to do. This is great. Yeah.
Right, and then if they're like a really if they're a streamer that's worth maybe sponsoring, then you even go that far and do that. But yeah, it's that kind of stuff. Like nobody kind of knew about the game to begin with, and so obviously it would have benefited a lot from us talking about it pre-release and then like that frames it for people. People would actually understand what it was. And so I think that was a big issue right away, was that they were like, it hit Steam and people were like, what? Don't understand what this is, right? So it's not that it was hard to understand in terms of the description, but it's novel. It's not like the first Twitch game ever that's existed and stuff, but there's not a lot of them.
Super niche, designed specifically for the streamer to play with their audience. That's not
and
wide
that
appeal.
was probably the one thing that really made it so we felt okay with doing what we did.
Yeah.
Is that it's like, this is not a game that we really want to have a huge Steam audience for, because it doesn't make sense to have a huge
not going to
Steam
build
audience
up
for
500,000 wish lists, because it's only going to be the streamers that are interested in it.
If we're getting a bunch of wish lists from people that are not streamers, then that's what we talked about earlier, low value wish lists, right? Like, even if it's a free game in that sense and all that. But it's oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, is there any final thoughts? Because I know you wanted to spend a few minutes on Elden Ring a bit more, and then we'll wrap soon. So just want to know if you had any last minute details for Chef Squad.
We should look at the data at some point as a follow up to this, and maybe just see how the traffic's doing for a game that, like Chef Squad, that didn't really get any of that pre-release lead up, and really like very small amounts of marketing, but really small, like I would call it spot marketing. Like not like a full push or anything like that. Could definitely glean a few things from how the traffic's coming in then and now, as in launch period, and then like to the point of where we're at today. And we can also talk about maybe some of the developments that have happened with Chef Squad since, and how we were able to make things work out for us, despite us sort of like, marketing wise shooting ourselves in the foot right away, knowing it's proof of concept. We're not going to go that direction.
Gotcha.
So there are some things that we want to talk about that, but
sure.
Yeah, that's about it. With Elden Ring, it's just, to me, I wanted to mention it because it's standing out to me, because I asked you this question and you agreed with me, and you sort of reaffirmed this for me, Bumpy. I was wondering, because the sales were already so high, but we're only at like day 5, day 6, day 7,
25th
of this game.
7, right? No.
Yeah, so we're like 1 week, right? Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
5
We're about
days?
like
5 days, I think.
Oh, right, because the 28th is the end of the month last month, but so not quite a full week. So there's still a lot of data that to unfurl, that or unfold over the next several weeks and beyond that we're going to talking about it now is sort of talking about it like a breaking news story, where you're why are you talking about it now? You don't know anything, news person. So I'm not trying to get deep into the data, but just kind of the visual of what I'm seeing, the eye test. Elden Ring to me is like a Souls game, Dark Souls. Well, it is not to me, but it is actually like from Software that does the Dark Souls games, that does the Demon Souls games, and these games very, very routinely, when it's their time, right? They don't happen all the time, of course, but every couple of years or so, they just jump to the top of the charts. And they stay there for a while. And so when Elden Ring did that, I didn't want to just presume this to be the case, but Bumpy kind of confirmed it. I asked Bumpy, I was like, is Elden Ring like the biggest version of the Souls games to this point? Like, is it selling that much more? And he said yes. And there's a couple of reasons for that. There's a clear, like, the social media storm around it is perfect right now, right? Like, I mean, I can't describe to you how much Elden Ring content is hitting my social media right now, specifically Twitter. It is every other post is about Elden Ring. Doesn't matter if you're a content creator or just a random retweet of a player showing off their video where they fell off the edge or whatever. Yeah, memes everywhere. So it's like a perfect no maidens memes everywhere and stuff like that. There's just so many different things that are happening on the social media thing. And Bumpy and our other friend Mutana pointed out, George R.R. Martin, the writer of A Song of Ice and Fire and like the Game of Thrones show, is involved in this in terms of some of the lore building. He had a tweet yesterday where he was wearing a helm and was promoting Elden Ring, and I think hashtag Elden Ring, that kind of stuff. And so what that does, TD, is that it exposes this game to like a way wider net of people that otherwise probably wouldn't have even considered it, just because of Martin's inclusion. And as Bumpy points out, it also brings in, I'm like speaking for Bumpy now, this entirely, sorry Bumpy, but like you pointed out to me before, it is like, a lot of people are coming to this game thinking, oh, it'll just be like sort of a merry romp around like a dark world and stuff like that. It's a very
rude awakening.
It's a very, very, very challenging game. In fact, considered one of the more challenging games, if not most challenging series, maybe in video game history. It emphasizes the idea of you either need to know what you're doing or you need to be able to read patterns and get really good at them and that kind of thing and stuff. So some people are kind of butting heads with it a little bit. There's a tweet out there that was like, I can't wait to see some of these casual fans of this of Elden Ring's kind of lore get the rude awakening of they can't even get through parts of the game. You know what I mean? It's gonna happen. Like
I saw a few times things where people went and they played Dark Souls 3 or 1 or Demon's or whatever it was, and they're like, yeah, the first and the last boss, over 50% of the people will ever see are the same boss because they can't get past the first boss and they quit the game and don't play it anymore. And I get that because the very first time I played, I didn't like the control. I mean, I came from playing something else that was very fluid, very fast moving, very nice. It was Kingdoms of Amalur. And then I go into the plodding, slow, methodical, clunky. I don't know. It's good, but it doesn't feel good when you come from something that's much more fluid. So yeah, I was immediately, I bounced off the game, didn't like it, but I did go back and well, now I'm a fan of the series. But yeah.
So Tiny Disaster, one of my points of this is that there are levels to this sales stuff. There is no ceiling. And where Dark Souls and Demon Souls was before was like, upper echelon, very high up, like to the point of where, compete with anybody, kind of, any other game out there at the very top echelon. And yet they found a way to go to a completely different level now, like where it's like, they found a way to hit that flavor of the month/year thing. Because they have a really good game and that people like to play. It's very sound design.
The hype and the feel of, and everybody knows Cyberpunk's expectations and everything going into Cyberpunk before the release was through the roof. It's that level of a release.
I mean, it reminds me of Among Us. I mean, how big that went. Like, I know Among Us is not the same kind of game at all, and I'm not trying to compare them apples to apples, but how Among Us has pervaded our society. I can't go anywhere. My child has a Among Us, like coloring thing on the refrigerator. He got that from kindergarten. He didn't buy that thing. You know what I mean? Like that's just being distributed by kindergarten teachers. Like the pervasiveness of Among Us is truly insane. I told you when I was in that little arcade in Florida, there's just these Among Us plushies that you would just never think, an indie game would have these kind of things here at this place. So it's like Minecraft, annoyingly, I know, but it's true. Minecraft, Among Us, like, and I feel like, and there's other games that that have reached this thing. Some reach them quickly and dissipate. Fallout or Fall Guys we've reached this threshold, but unfortunately they didn't stay there for very long. Like Elden Ring's going to maintain this for a while, and it's crazy to me. They've reached the highest threshold that we've probably ever seen before. Maybe not higher than anything that we've seen before, but as high. Like as far as like complete dominance of news cycle, social media cycle,
on Twitch,
people who don't play games talking about it, or that don't regularly game or are invested in the games industry but are still like play games, I guess, so to speak, are coming in out of the woodwork. That's when that you've reached that just crazy upper echelon.
They dethroned Grand Theft Auto 5 by about 50K, which just
sits there all the time up there. Yeah. So
yeah, and one, it's only slightly behind just chatting, which is crazy in and of itself that it's that close.
Another thing that's nuts about this, there's supposed to be maybe 2 or 3 more releases like that that might occur to this level this year. Maybe in the next couple of months. What? So we'll see. I don't know if there's room for
this week. I don't know if there's the Final Fantasy Tactics game,
right?
Which is going to.
I don't know if there's room. I don't know if there's room for everybody. We'll see. We'll see how it works. The echo chambers are still going to be talking about these games individually and stuff like that, but there's certain things that just the chambers break, right? The bubbles break, and Elden Ring has broken that, and is all over the place right now. So it's very interesting. I think the tie-in with the book stuff, or with the author TD in particular, was like just such a savvy move. You know what I mean by them? Because it's like you can't get any bigger within your own realm. You had to go outside of it, like your own medium, so to speak, and they did that, which is crazy to me. So.
This is one of those success stories because this is basically good marketing versus bad marketing. Kingdoms of Amalur, R.A. Salvatore, he did D&D books, did Drizzt and all that stuff. The creator of Spawn, Todd McFarlane, he was a writer. They created the world of Kingdom of Amalur with some other folks, and somebody from Oblivion as kind of the head and all that stuff. Anyway, same kind of story, but it was just a new studio and terrible marketing. They released against, or just after Skyrim, they released against, I think, kind of in junction with, but Mass Effect 3. And then you have this wonderful marketing from Software being, what it is, having its own genre birthed from the games that it creates. Super popular author that has a an award-winning TV show, fantastic books. People are waiting on the next thing. It's just night and day, even though it's kind of the same story. It happened completely different.
Right.
So shocking. Anyway, I know that A Tiny Disaster will have to disappear soon, but we're more or less done. Any final thoughts?
Most of this makes me want to do another why were these games successful chat at some point in the future.
Yeah. I like
Sure.
those.
Sure.
It's a good point.
So next week we're going to be diving into what's next in game subscription services, something that makes me nauseous to think about, because I think that is just a terrible, terrible thing in general. While I know many people are the opposite, and they think it's a great thing. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything. So
yeah, that'll be like a facing facts one next week. It's not like everybody's like woohoo about that. It's just like the facts of the matter at the moment.
It's kind of like
And
all
we'll
the
see if
streaming services coming to life on, for television networks and all this stuff. It's just that all over again, right?
It's inevitable. Yeah. So it's one of those things that, maybe not the cheeriest of topics, but it'll be interesting to talk about what major players are doing in this regard. So.
All right, folks, that's it. We'll see you next week with more game development discussions, game industry discussions. So, bye.